In this video, I'm going to show you how you could build a $39 Zaxara the Exemplary Commander deck. Let's get started. Quick disclaimer, the total cost of this deck was just under $39 as of the day of recording. That is, however, excluding the cost of the Commander as well as the basic lands in the deck. Zaxara the Exemplary is a 4-cast 2/3 Nightmare Hydra with Death Touch. We, however, don't mind too much about the Death Touch ability. We are more interested in the bottom half of that card, which says, whenever you cast a spell with X in its mana cost, create a 0/0 green Hydra creature token, and then put X +1/+1 counters on it. Zaxara can also tap to add 2 mana of any one color, so this commander helps to fix our colors and then give us creature tokens for casting spells with X in their cost. So it rewards us for playing bigger spells. We are going to try to capitalize on that by playing as many spells with X in their cost as we can manage. We're going to start out by talking about the Accelerants in this deck. We are running 18, which is on the upper end quite a lot. And to start us off, those Accelerants, we have Rampant Growth, Search for Tomorrow, and Cultivate, all of which help us to cheat extra lands to the battlefield early. We also have Harrow, Explosive Vegetation, and Sky Shroud Claim, which do more of the same. Colony Heart Expedition and Circuitous Route, which also help us cheat extra lands onto the battlefield. Do note that the Circuitous Route doesn't just get basic lands, it can also get gates. So we are running all 3 of those, Dimir, Golgari, and Simic, which enter tapped and can give us 2 of our 3 colors. We also have cards like Diligent Farmhand, Dawn Treader Elk, and Embodiment of Spring, which are creatures that we can sacrifice to get extra lands to the battlefield early. These are great because we can chump block with them and then sacrifice them. Do note that the Embodiment of Spring has to tap to use its ability, so it's slower than the other 2 because we have to wait a full turn cycle if we don't have haste. Font of Fertility and Sakura Tribe Elder are more of the same permanents that we sacrifice to get extra lands to the battlefield. We do have Fertilid, which allows us to fetch extra lands out of our library to the battlefield, and it does so by removing +1/+1 counters from itself. We have quite a few ways to get +1/+1 counters on our creatures, so we're going to try to use Fertilid as many times as we can, hopefully draw out or pull all the basics out of our deck. Gyre Sage is a mana dork that has evolved, and so every time a bigger creature than it enters the battlefield, it's going to get a +1/+1 counter, and then we can tap it to add green to our mana pool equal to the number of +1/+1 counters on it. All the time we're playing bigger and bigger creatures with this deck, so Gyre Sage kind of feeds itself because we end up using it for mana to play a big creature, which in turn makes the Gyre Sage bigger, meaning the following turn we can play an even larger creature. Incubation Druid is another mana dork that if we adapt it, gives it +1/+1 counters, and then once it's been adapted, we can tap it to add 3 mana of any type to our mana pool. Zaxara the Exemplary once again taps for 2 mana, and then we have Farseek, which helps us to cheat a swamp or an island to the battlefield tapped. Do note that the Farseek can fetch out Mystic Sanctuary as it is an island. However, Mystic Sanctuary is going to enter the battlefield tapped, so we aren't going to get the trigger to put an instant or sorcery on top of our library. So I recommend that with your fetches, you try to get that threshold number of 3 so that when you do draw into Mystic Sanctuary, you can put an instant or sorcery back on top of your library. I wouldn't go fetch it unless you were going to fail to find on a basic. Next up, we're going to talk about the cards that fit our game plan, specific to our game plan. We have 13 of them. And Winding Constrictor, Corpsejack Menace, and Evolution Sage all fit the bill because they help put extra +1/+1 counters on the Hydras that we have entering the battlefield off of Zaxara, as well as any of our other creatures that have +1/+1 counters. Then we have Vorel of the Hulklade, which does more of the same, doubling up the +1/+1 counters on our creatures. And then we have bigs like Altered Ego and Hooded Hydra, which enter with X +1/+1 counters. The Altered Ego enters as a copy of a creature, so super fun to copy our opponent's best thing, but just make it bigger. And then Hooded Hydra, which when it dies, gives us X11 snakes. So floods the board with a bunch of little things for us, which provides a lot of great utility. More bigs, we have Feral Hydra, which enters with X counters, and then we can pay 3 to put a counter on it. We can even get our opponents or the other players at the table to pay mana into this so that they can help us finish off another player. Endless One is just a body with X +1/+1 counters, and then the Nimbus Swimmer is another body with X +1/+1 counters, but it does have flying. Hungering Hydra is another body with X +1/+1 counters, but it can't be blocked by more than one creature, and if it's dealt damage, we get to put that many +1/+1 counters on it. And then Endrace Forerunners helps us to weaponize all those Hydras even more by giving them Vigilance, Trample, and +2/+2 until end of turn. Some of my favorite cards in this deck are Simic Ascendency, Heroes Bane, and Rogue's Passage. Simic Ascendency allows us to put counters on our creatures, which is nice, but we actually are more interested in the growth counters that Simic Ascendency gets whenever we put a +1/+1 counter on one of our own creatures. Once Simic Ascendency gets to 20 growth counters, if it's still on the table at the beginning of our upkeep, we just win the game. Heroes Bane is a great way to get a lot of those counters on there. If we don't have Zaxara on the battlefield, it's been removed too many times, we're not getting a bunch of Hydras with X +1/+1 counters, which triggers Simic Ascendency. The Heroes Bane, we can just pay mana into it to get all of those growth counters. Heroes Bane also works really well with Rogue's Passage because we can make it unblockable and then just swing in for lethal damage on an opponent with a 32/32 Hydra or 64/64 or whatever size you grow this Hydra to. Next up, we're going to talk about the cards that interfere with our opponent's game plan. How are we going to stop our opponents from doing what they want to do? For creature removal, we have Death Sprout, which kills a creature and then puts a land on the battlefield tapped, so it helps ramp us out a little bit. Reality Shift can exile a creature and it manifests the top card of that creature's controller's library. And then Deathwind, which gives a creature -X/-X. More X spells, which is great, and both Reality Shift and Deathwind get around Indestructible. More cards that get around Indestructible are Battle at the Bridge, as well as Erebos' Intervention. They give a creature just like Deathwind, -X/-X. However, they also gain us X life, so help us to stay in the game a little bit longer, which is nice. Erebos' Intervention has the utility that we can remove cards from our opponent's graveyard if we need to, and then Disembowel to destroy a creature with converted mana cost of X. Mass Manipulation allows us to steal our opponent's creatures. Sultai Charm is great utility because we can destroy a monocolored creature, destroy an artifact or enchantment, or we can draw 2 cards to discard a card. Putrefy gives us some utility because we can destroy an artifact or creature with it. Plus, they can't be regenerated. More artifact enchantment removal, we have Nature's Claim, Molder, and Reclamation Sage. Do note that the Molder, just like the Battle at the Bridge and Erebos' Intervention, gain us X life when we cast it, so this helps us stay in the game a little bit longer. As well, that artifact or enchantment can't be regenerated off of Molder. A few counterspells we're running are Condescend and Syncopate, which are both X-costed counterspells. Condescend allows us to scry 2 after we've cast it, and it counters the spell unless its controller pays X. And then Syncopate does the same thing. Our opponent can't cast that spell unless they pay X, and then if it does get countered, that spell gets exiled. Plasm Capture fits in really nice in this deck because we counter the spell, and then at the beginning of our next pre-combat main phase, we get X mana to our mana pool in any combination of colors, where X was the spell's converted mana cost that we countered. So this helps us to really surge ahead of our opponents, giving us a ton of mana in one go to dump into one of our X spells. Distorting Wake is kind of the cheap man's Cyclonic Rift. It's pay X and 3 blue, and it allows us to return X target non-land permanents to their owner's hand. So we can wipe the most important things or even the entire board of our opponents using this spell once we're into the late game. Next up, we're going to talk about the cards that provide us consistency. We have 14 of them, which is a little bit on the lower end, but quite a few of them are X spells, so we're hoping to get a lot more value out of them. Some of the ones that aren't X spells but are permanents that sit on the table and give us value over time are Colossal Majesty, Kiora's Behemoth, Beckoner, and Elemental Bond. All of these care about creatures. We want to have big creatures at the start of our turns so we can draw cards off of Colossal Majesty, 4 or greater. We want big creatures to enter the battlefield, 4 or greater with Kiora, we get to draw a card, and 3 or greater with Elemental Bond, and we get to draw a card. Kiora's Behemoth Beckoner has the added bonus of allowing us to untap a permanent, so a little bit of extra versatility there. And if we have Evolution Sage out, we can proliferate, keeping Kiora on the battlefield, giving us a little bit more longevity. Return of the Wild Speaker allows us to draw a ton of cards if we have a big on the table, or we can just pump our team using Return of the Wild Speaker. Inspiring Call gives us a bunch of draws equal to the number of +1/+1 counters we have on creatures, and it also makes all of our creatures with counters indestructible. And then Shamanic Revelation is going to draw us a card for each creature we control and gain us 4 life for each creature we control with power 4 or greater. So these are creature dependent, but they give us a lot of value off of just one card. Painful Truths is going to allow us to draw 3 cards and lose 3 life as long as we pay a green, blue, and black into it. Thassa's Intervention is another counter spell, just like Condescend and Syncopate, where it counters a spell unless its controller pays, this time twice X. In playtesting, I've had this in my hand and left it up as a counter spell, but most of the time I end up casting it as a draw spell, because the first mode says look at the top X cards of your library, put 2 of them into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So usually I get to the end of my opponent's turn that's right before me, and I hadn't needed to cast Thassa's Intervention, so I end up just dumping all the mana I can into Thassa's Intervention and getting the 2 best cards I can off of the top. Gadwick the Wizened is a 3/3 who draws X cards when he enters. You pay 3 blue and then X and draw a bunch. I always forget he has this second ability which says whenever you cast a blue spell, tap target non-land permanent and opponent controls. So try to be better than me and remember that you get that trigger. More X spells, we have Mind Spring, which just draws us X cards, and Villainous Wealth, one of my favorites. You pay X into it and a black, green, blue, and then you exile the top X cards off of somebody's library and cast any number of non-land cards with converted mana cost X or less from among them without paying their mana cost. You're going to get a ton of value off of this, especially in the late game once you're dumping 10, 15 plus mana into this thing. Worm Calling is really nice in this deck because it has buyback, which means you can pay an extra 2 and a green to put it back into your hand after you've cast it. And it puts an XX worm creature token into play. One thing I wanted to note, this doesn't put a 0/0 with X counters, so it's not going to trigger your Simic Ascendancy like the Hydras off of Zaxara. However, it will trigger Kiora, Behemoth Beckoner, as well as the Elemental Bond, so you can use this over and over again to get extra draws, or you can just use it to get a huge creature one time go, which is nice as well. Death Denied is going to allow us to return X cards from our graveyard to our hand. Find is going to return 2 creatures from our graveyard to our hand, and it also has the versatility that we can play 6 on Finality, put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature, and then all the creatures get -4/-4 until end of turn. So it works as a small to mid-size board wipe as well. Next up, we're going to talk about the lands in the deck. We have Mortuary Mire, which helps us recur a creature to the top of our library. Like we said earlier, Rogue's Passage, which makes a creature unblockable, and Mystic Sanctuary, which can get us an instant or sorcery back on top of our library. Then we have Myriad Landscape, Blighted Woodland, Evolving Wilds, and Terramorphic Expanse, which help us to fix our mana, fetching out the basics and putting what we need onto the battlefield. Foul Orchard, Golgari Guildgate, Golgari Rot Farm, Jungle Hollow, Llanowar Wastes, and Temple of Malady, which can tap for a black-green and provide us some other kind of utility sometimes in either extra life or scries. Otherwise, they just enter tapped or bounce a land or something like that. More lands, we have Command Tower and Opulent Palace, which give us all 3 of our colors. Lumbering Falls, Simic Growth Chamber, Simic Guildgate, Thornwood Falls, Woodland Stream give us green-blue. The Lumbering Falls has the ability to turn into a 3/3 green-blue elemental creature token, so if we need an extra blocker or attacker, we can do that. And then Dimir Aqueduct, Dimir Guildgate, Dismal Backwater give us blue-black. For basics, we are running 9 forests, 5 islands, and 2 swamps. there's the mana curve for you, so it looks pretty standard, with the exception that there's a huge explosion at the 7+ because I put all of the X spells in the 7+ category. I configured that they were going to cost us 7, which most of the time when I'm playtesting this, I've put way more than 7 mana into it, or each of those X spells, but that's just the way I calculated it. Otherwise, the X cost would be really huge, as the average CMC for this deck was 4.31. Here, I have included a few budget-friendly upgrades I would consider if I were to go above that $1 price point. If you want to see the deck list, as well as some other suggestions I would consider, check out the link in the description. Or, better yet, share down in the comments how you would upgrade this deck. That way, others can see your brilliant ideas and alter to their liking. If you liked the video, you should give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. If you do, make sure you ring the bell so you don't miss any of the new weekly content from Budget Commander. Otherwise, you can check out the video in the top right of the screen or one of the playlists on the bottom. Peace.